Moje ime je Mateja Lazar.
Jaz sem Sabina Briški.
Prihajava iz Centra Ustvarjalna Evropa v Sloveniji, organizator konference Ustvarjalna Evropa išče publiko. Opravičujemo se za akademskih 15 minut zamude, ampak to je bilo vse dramaturško načrtovano, zato ker se pač nahajamo v akademski inštituciji. Spoštovana gospa Barbara Koželj-Podlogar, cenjeni gospod Peter Beckingham in ostali gosti konference, dragi udeleženci, ekipa Centra Ustvarjalna Evropa v Sloveniji vas lepo pozdravlja na konferenci, na katero smo povabili domače in mednarodne strokovnjake z področja kulture, filma in audiovizualnih sektorjev, da bi izmenjali stališča in z vami delili znanja in izkušnje povezane s temo, ki v obdobju do konca leta 2020 ne usmerja le delovanja našega centra, ampak o njej intenzivno razpravljajo tako ustvarjalci kot odločevalci. Dogodek bo zaradi tujih gostov potekal v angleškem jeziku, brez tolmačenja, zato iz vljudnosti do naših gostov prehajamo na delovni jezik. Edina izjema bo pozdravni nagovor gospe Barbare Koželj-Podlogar z Ministrstva za kulturo.
So, dear guests, welcome to our conference. Thank you for the really big participation, which was also the reason that we are a little bit late. So, thank you for understanding. Here, as you heard, this is Mateja and I'm Sabina. We are Creative Europe Desk Slovenia team with our helpers around, and we are happy to welcome you at this conference. Representing the National Information Office of the EU program Creative Europe and being the organizers of this whole conference, we believe that the so-called audience development is not a novelty, and I think that you are all aware of this being here. It's closely related to the creative process itself, and numerous cultural and art events and projects happening in Slovenia presently and recently are dealing with this concept or rethinking it. And this makes us believe that this is not merely a political priority to be fulfilled in order to fundraise successfully on national or European level. So having this in mind, we can mention 3 recent cases that our audience might be familiar with. Here in May, Kinodvor City Cinema organized an intense 2-day international conference on film education.
Further on, participatory practices in art were in focus at the panel organized within Mladi Levi International Festival just 2 weeks ago. And in the nearby Škuc Gallery, just across the Ljubljanica River, Axioma Institute for Contemporary Art has just opened a group exhibition entitled Eternal September, aimed at exploring the relationship between professional and amateur art. So this makes us believe that our timing is right. Let us just shortly present the course of the conference. So after the introduction by our keynote speaker, Mr. Peter Beckingham, a discussion moderated by Luka Piškorić will follow, and there are 2 sessions with a short coffee break in between. The conference will conclude with a brief overview of the discussion presented by Jana Wilcoxon here at the front, and she will in addition help any of you who would like to ask questions to our guest speakers but is not feeling comfortable in asking it in English. So you can do it in Slovene, and Jana will try to kindly translate it into English for you. So please do participate in the discussion.
Okay, now we are inviting Mrs. Barbara Koželj-Podlogar to please open and greet you all.
Dear conference participants, spoštovani gostje, spoštovani udeleženci te konference, dovolite, da se najprej zahvalim in izrečem res čestitam organizatorjem te konference, čestitam jim za vso dobro opravljeno delo, za vso delo, ki ga še opravljajo, kajti veste, da je seveda Slovenija bila izjemno uspešna v pridobivanju evropskih sredstev na programu Ustvarjalna Evropa in seveda tudi s pomočjo te ekipe, ki jo imamo tukaj v Sloveniji. Ko smo razmišljali na Ministrstvu za kulturo o temi današnje konference, smo ponovno prepoznali to temo kot seveda pravočasni in aktualni odziv na teme, ki so in bodo odločale o pridobivanju sredstev iz evropskih sredstev. Vprašanje, kako pridobiti občinstvo, pa seveda ni le vprašanje, ki bi se dotikalo pridobivanja sredstev. Je izjemno pomembno vprašanje, predvsem v današnjem času, ko se soočamo seveda z veliko ponudbo in vprašanje, kako v tej ponudbi izbrati kvalitetne vsebine. Takšne vsebine, ki ostanejo in ki seveda naše obiskovalce prepričalo, da je vredno uživati kulturo. Za razvoj in nadgradnjo pridobivanja občinstva, za različne modele pridobivanja občinstva je predvsem pomembno zavedanje, kaj kultura je, kaj pomeni za našo družbo, kaj pomeni za posameznika, kako pomaga ustvarjati odnose in ne nazadnje, kakšne temelje ustvarja za kreativno in produktivno družbo. Pri tem na Ministrstvu za kulturo menimo, da je izjemnega pomena kulturna vzgoja. Zato smo torej tudi velik del ali pa tudi posamezno vprašanje posvetili tudi v nacionalnem programu za kulturo, ki je seveda temeljni dokument na področju kulture. Kulturna vzgoja se po svoji vsebini in poslanstvu pojavlja na presečišču kulturnega, vzgojno-izobraževalnega, znanstvenega in gospodarskega sektorja. V sodobni kulturno raznoliki in na znanju temelječi družbi mora posameznik za kakovostno življenje in aktivno udeležbo v družbi med izobraževanjem osvojiti različne veščine in razviti seveda tudi določene kompetence. Različne in mnoge študije v današnjem času kažejo, kako pomembna je kulturna vzgoja, tudi pri pridobivanju občinstva. Namreč s kulturno vzgojo se razvija kritični odnos do nas samih, kritični odnos do družbe, krepi se zavedanje o kulturi, o naši kulturni dediščini in ne nazadnje seveda tudi o medkulturnem dialogu, ki je tudi zelo pomembna tema že nekaj let v evropskem prostoru. Seveda pa sistem z prespraševanjem o modelih pridobivanja občinstva zavedamo tudi vprašanje, ki je seveda v tej množični kulturi izjemno pomembno, torej kakšno publiko ustvariti, torej publiko takšno, ki si jo želimo, ki ne bo sledila samo komercialni ponudbi, temveč bo znala prepoznavati kvalitetne vsebine. Vse to je del nacionalnega programa za kulturo. Zato vam seveda spoštovani gostje in pa predvsem spoštovani obiskovalci te konference, kjer se je ponovno izkazalo odlično delo naše ekipe, ker je publika ponovno zelo številčna, želim zelo uspešno debato in seveda veliko odgovorov, ki se bodo lahko uspešno prenesla v prakso. Hvala lepa.
Hvala, gospod Barbara Koželj-Podlogar. Thank you. And now we are really, really honored to be able to host Mr. Peter Buckingham from British company Sampo Media, a renowned expert for audience development, who will open the conference and give us some thinking on how to have audience in mind and how you should have audience in mind, because we organize this conference with having you, our audience, and you should have your audience in mind. So thank you, Peter, and please open the conference.
Thank you. So thank you, Minister. Thank you, Creative Desk, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My background has always been implicitly or explicitly about so-called audience development. Implicitly, through my work in the private sector, which has been in retailing, or in the for-profit sector, in private sector in distribution. And explicitly, through the public sector, where I ran large audience development programs, helping to enable art forms, mainly film, to connect with audiences. Well, this speech is a brief reflection on some of the failures of that approach, and my current thinking about why that happened and what might be done. I'll just briefly just say who I am really. That's some of the companies that we are currently working with in various pieces. We work with film distribution, we work with organizations, we work with TV companies and so forth. I'm particularly proud of this though. I find myself back running cinemas. I'm chair of a new cinema that's opened up in Barnes, a 2-screen little independent cinema that has bars and restaurants in it. There's the members' bar, it's rather nice, isn't it? Nice chandelier. And there's one of the public cafes. It's opened in September last year, and it's very successful, so I'm very proud of that. It's called the Olympic Studios in Barnes. Do come to see it in London and ring me up if you want a tour. Anyway, so that's what I'm kind of been doing. But I want to go through there. There are 2 areas I want to talk through, really. The first is a kind of setup, which is the groups and basic assumptions. So bear with me, it will come together. And the second part is a proposition, which I'm kind of calling the audience in the mind. Now this is Wilfred Bion. I don't know if you know him, but he's one of the most influential psychiatrists or psychotherapists after Sigmund Freud and Melanie Klein, described as the most influential after them. And he spent his life understanding groups. In part, that was due to his experiences as an officer in the First World War, but also in the Second World War, where he set up the army, the recruitment process for British officers, for deciding who was going to be a British officer. In the First World War, you became a British officer if you were with the aristocracy. In the Second World War, there was a selection process. We learned something. And he set that up. But most notably, he undertook group therapy with neurotics and people who were having mental difficulties. And in 1961, he wrote this up in a book called Experiences in Groups. And that was the seminal work that triggered off a lot of the stuff. In this, he realized that the patients on his groups were conspiring to defeat the therapy. Not obviously or overtly, but they kept changing the subject or avoiding conversations that might lead to examining their behavior. And this behavior is normally associated from an individual, but he felt that there was something coordinated, a coordinated response was going on with the patients. And he then wondered how to analyze this situation. Was this a collection of individuals, or was this a coordinated group action? In the end, he said it was neither or both. And in answer to the question, are groups of people best thought of as aggregation of individuals or a cohesive unit, he said that we are hopelessly committed to both. In other words, we operate both as individuals, making individual assessments, but we also enter into deep bonds with other people, emotionally, that transcend individual intellectual desires. Now, all groups have an emotional content. It's what keeps a group together. It has to have a purpose, or why is it there? And it has to satisfy the members, or why do they stay? But the problem is the groups often become very distracted from their purpose, and a group is more concerned about satisfying its members than the goals of the group. Bion argues that in every group, 2 groups are actually present. The work group, that is the area that you're meant to be doing, you say that you're doing, and the basic assumption group. The basic assumption group describes the tacit, underlying assumptions on which the behavior of the group is based. Bion specifically identified 3 basic assumptions: dependency, fight, flight, and pairing. And Bion argues that the threat to most groups is internal, of falling into an emotionally satisfying but ultimately ineffective behavior. Now that's a really important statement of what I'm about to say next. That what we tend to do in groups is to fall into emotionally satisfying, it works for us emotionally, but ultimately ineffective because it doesn't actually deal with the primary task of what we set the group up to do. So groups can split into 3 types. And in that time, they can forget about what they set themselves up really to do. And let me give 2 possible examples from our world or my world. This is the 2012 British government film strategic plan produced by a work group by the new incoming coalition government. It's entitled "It Begins with the Audience." except of course it doesn't. It might be instructive to think about the British Film Institute, which is its government strategic arm in this context, because the British Film Institute is an organisation that is essentially in fight-flight, because it sees itself as the bastion of film civilization against the heathen world of commercial. It sees the world from the battlefield of art versus commerce. The commercial can be a commercial cinema or a commercial film, and this is often described in the language inside the British Film Institute as a multiplex film. In the BFI's world, film is under constant attack from these sources, and without the BFI, the tide of commercialisation would rise up and swamp film, and we'll be left with nothing except Hollywood, another term used in the negative sense, with nothing except Hollywood cinema. Put another way, it is the British Film Institute and the British Film Institute alone that knows what's good cinema, and its audience development activity is fundamentally making sure these chosen films are, as best in as many ways possible, seen by UK citizens. Except, of course, that they don't see them. In this scenario, the whole object of the audience is to passively receive what's good for them. Frankly, in this day and age, people don't respond to that. People like to be involved, to have a voice, to be respected, to be talked to. They don't like being patronised, instructed, or given little influence in the way that their lives might be run. So despite any number of new technologies and opportunities, the decision-making of the British Film Institute is made opaquely on a weird, odd criteria, which is about quality or about art or about a BFI brand decision slant. Now, the BFI actually does very, very good things. My critique is different. It is to say that even though an organisation might claim as its very primary purpose is to put the audience first, in fact, there are very different forces to play. So what can we learn from this? First, it's crucial to understand what our basic assumption task is, or how the group really is actually behaving. Now, in terms of cultural policy across Europe, there seems to be two areas of basic assumptions task. And the first, under Bjorn's analysis, might be dependence. And here I would say that we are in the position of venerating the artist. The groups that we form, strategic agencies, film festivals, film clubs and so on, often are primarily focused on supporting the artist's creativity. Here we bow down to the concept of the individual, to the artist in film speak as auteur. We idealise directors, for example, even though film is a hugely collaborative medium. We talk about talent. We use the same terminology as banks. Banks finding and paying for the best talent, and justify huge programs of work in developing new talent. We form groups of dependencies around these totemic artists. We pay them more, we write about them more, and we fund them more. We dedicate film festivals to them. In the UK, we talk about a signature director, as opposed to other directors. A signature director receives funding almost automatically, in a mysterious process that has never been articulated publicly, but actually means that directors that have reached this groupthink definition will always get funding. Mike Leigh, Ken Loach, Andrew Arnold, Shane Meadows, etc. It's as if we've used the term signature unconsciously to give them celebrity status. Signature status as if we were autograph hunters seeking signatures from celebrities. The basic assumption in these groups is dependency. We venerate and support a particular class and a particular type of creative person, no matter what our actual work objective is meant to be. As Bjorn says, creative policy groups are in danger of falling into emotionally satisfying but ultimately ineffective behaviour by creating a passive dependency in relation to some artistic and creative roles. The second possible intervention or basic assumption is fight-flight again. Scratch beneath a lot of the media programme, interventions, and you hear a belief by officials that the project is to prevent an American takeover of a European culture. Here, the UK is often described in this context as the USA's aircraft carrier. The Anglo-Saxon model is meant to is taken to mean the UK's proximity to the great Satan Hollywood. I could give many examples of this from my own experience in Europe and European meetings, and for quite a time, and still is in some quarters, for example, the whole digitisation project of cinemas was seen as an attempt by Hollywood to get an even firmer grip on the distribution chain, and therefore should be resisted. Again, the media program does great work, and again my critique is different. What I'm trying to get at is that the underlying main task of some groups is, in basic assumption, can be of dependence and or fight-flight, which gets in the way of a basic, proper audience development plan. Now, why does this matter? It matters because we need great art, and we need great creativity. And we need this valued and admired and appreciated by the people in our spheres to enrich our society, and we need that to challenge our perceptions of the world. And in many sectors and areas, not all, arguably, there is a staleness and stagnation that is not healthy. And the fault may actually be in the audience programs that attempt, like a bad bandage, to cover up a flawed creative process and thinking in so many places. Now, let's have a quick look at this. This is the goal, this is the, I think this is one of the pieces of paper I sent, this is the European goal. The goal of the audience development activities is to help European artists and cultural professionals and their works reach as many people as possible across Europe and extend access to cultural works to underrepresented groups. Now you would think there's nothing wrong with that, and it's sort of okay, isn't it? Well, this is a passivity of intent, that the audience is there to be reached and to have access. Now, you are all audiences in this room. Does that make you, as an audience, want to stand up and do something? Is this a call to action for European culture that resonates through every fibre of your being? And quite frankly, do you want to be reached? And are you marching for access? No, I don't believe you do. I think, or I want to be stimulated. I want to be excited. I want to experience something wonderful, moving, and exhilarating. And this, sadly, is a top-down approach to the audience who are seen as at the end of a process and at the end of a creative chain, when they will hopefully do something once they have been reached or once they have got access. The sentence is policy speak. It's about how, it's not about who or why. Now, Bjorn helped found the Tavistock Institute in North London, part of the National Health Service Tavistock Clinic, and here others developed his group theories into something called the organisation in the mind. I don't pretend to understand this. I leave that to my wife, who's a doctor of organisational behaviour at the Institute. She's much more intelligent than me, and I'm grateful for her brief input into this speech. And I'm also, by the way, to the internet guru Clay Shirky, who quotes extensively from Bjorn in his book Cognitive Surplus, in case you didn't think I was also cool and digitally sexy. But it did make me think of a concept of the audience in the mind. And I have been groping for a new way to bring the customer into the creative process. And by the way, we struggle with the word customer. Where else do we speak of audience? Most product development is about the customer. I'll return to this in a moment. So what do I mean by this? That the creative process at any part of the stage would benefit from having an audience in the mind and of the group helping to create the artifact. I think we need to rethink how and when we talk to the audience and how we bring them into our creative thinking. So I'm calling this the audience in the mind. Here I'm trying to articulate a different approach to the audience, one that is much more dynamic and integrated in thinking. I want to move the concept from this passive recipient of my art. And it might be instructive, again, to consider the difference between consumer and audience. Why do we in the media and art sector use the word audience and not consumer? It might be that the consumer is too difficult for us to engage with. They're too powerful in our mind. They would have an agreement with us as producers or creators. We would need to take on board their desires and needs as they would be consuming our works. They would press for satisfaction. They might even be greedy, because consumers consume, they eat, and they can become demanding. Audiences are nicer. They watch, they applaud, they don't consume. They don't have to be so thought about. They're not so scary. But in any event, perhaps that's all too radical. So let's stick to the audience. The audience is in my mind, and this is something on an individual and group level. And this audience is a person, someone who's drawn and painted and written about and with a life story attached to them. There might be more than one of them, but this person is in my mind, and it's in our minds, and I'll make this person a real, emotional, feeling, thinking, consuming person. I might even find real ones and talk to them all. I'm conscious that this might be an outlandish idea, especially for artists in this audience. And I'm so conscious of this that I decided to try and turn to being an artist myself. so I might at least be able to look you in the eyes without turning red. So in July this year, I walked 650 kilometres across the chalk downs of England. There's my path. Sleeping under hedges and by fields. There's a bit of a nice walk across England, and that's me sleeping in a hedge. And I was doing this to create an idea for a film, and the main medium I work in. I have one. I have several, actually. It took me 4 weeks to do this. I come up with quite a few ideas, but I have one. And it's oh, by the way, that's my tent. I made that myself. It's my walking sticks that hold it up. It's quite good, isn't it? It's a tarp tent, very light. But I have several ones, and I have one particular idea. It's a comedy about grief, music festivals, and Aldous Huxley. And for those who can read between the lines or know about Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, Huxley died of cancer, and in a very moving description written by his wife Laura, that's her letter, his actual hours were facilitated by injections of LSD. Basically, he died tripping. This is the actual letter that she wrote to his brother. It's in a book called Letters of Note. You can actually get this on the internet anyway. It's an extremely moving and very wonderful passage of someone's last hours of death. It's an extraordinary piece of writing. Anyway, the main audience in my mind is a 57-year-old woman who's cool, hip, music, and still goes clubbing, and she works at a very high level. She's got a European outlook, she loves cinema and art, and goes to the theatre, and often enjoys a fairly bohemian lifestyle. She likes challenging but also enjoyable experiences. She goes to the cinema occasionally, and she's called Laura. In my film, she's been bereaved and seeks ways to come to terms with her grief. I'm writing it for her. I figure if I can get her interested in seeing the film, then I can get a lot of like-minded people to see the film. So I'm currently writing this treatment to see if I can get any interest. I suppose you can watch this space. So what am I saying? I'm saying that audience development needs to be put at the real centre of organisations and individuals, and that the audience of the mind concept is an attempt to create a mindset that brings the consumer to life in the process. I don't think audiences want reach and access. I'm saying that our audiences and customers deserve and desire the most engaging experiences, the most challenging and exciting events, and a sense that they're being genuinely valued by artists and structures. And I view this as vital, especially in my field of media and film, because here I believe that a cultural elite are making policies that are increasingly not connected to the real world of people and not linked to what people are really looking for. And that mindset is spilling over into European filmmakers, who often and substantially are making films and art forms that are often completely disconnected from the artistic desires and ambitions of the audience. Now, this may well have parallels with the crisis in the so-called European project, where people are now failing to connect with it emotionally. And in the UK, the political class has lost touch with the desires and ambitions of its people and cannot seem to be able to frame a dialogue beyond reductionist market forces ideology. And this is in Scotland. People will vote for an alternative vision, and they will, and one that will see the 300-year-old United Kingdom dissolve in 8 days' time, because that vision, their vision, is focused upon an emotional vision of the kind of society people really want to live in. Not on nationalism, but on an emotional and value-driven description of how Scotland as a group can actually live. This is a group called Yestival, who went touring around Scotland. It's an extraordinary group who are part of the groundswell of people and they use culture and they connected to audiences very, very strongly to do this. And it's interesting to look at this because they raised money on crowdsourcing. That's their statement. And again, you could put that as a statement in terms of audience development and cultural connection and how important culture is to people and how much it can move people and how much it can really engage with people. I don't know if this is great art. I know they used art to move people. Okay? Now, a month ago, there was no chance at all for the Yes campaign to do anything, and then yesterday the polls came out, and I think that they're now neck and neck. And those kind of grassroots cultural interventions is audience development. That is what I believe an audience development program looks like. And it's also interesting, and we'll hear this from the next panel, this was triggered by a grassroots group who used crowdfunding to get their cultural campaign off the ground. So I want a vision that's the same with us, really. Because I think we too can have a culture that connect with people. which is a better way, I think, of approaching an audience development program. Because I don't want film to go in the same way as the United Kingdom is probably going at the moment in the UK. So my argument is, understand as Beyond did that we are hopelessly addicted to groups and to being an individual. Build an audience in our mind to focus on. Build out from an audience in the mind into our audience groups to create impact. But most importantly, frame any objective or artifact in what the audience would really want to engage with. Try to create an audience development policy that uses words like excitement, emotional joy, or challenging experiences, because that's what we all actually want in our lives. Thank you very much.